All right, everybody, this episode of WrestleMagic, we're having an interview with Donovan Dijak. And man, this is somebody that I've watched over the years, and I'm pretty excited for this because I feel like he hasn't really been given a fair shake, really, in some of the situations he's been in. But honestly, I'm really happy to see him here, and I'm happy to really give him this conversation and this opportunity to tell his story. So, Mr. Dijak, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing fine, and man, I'm really excited to have you on the show. And as always, also joining me will be the gardener, Michael Gross. Michael, how you doing?
I'm doing great, my nephew. And Mr. Dijak, it's great to actually meet you and talk to you in person. I followed your career for a little over 10 years and probably about close to 12 or 13 when I found out about you in Ring of Honor. And I just want to say that this is a big honor to have you on the show. And thank you, nephew, for introducing me. So let's get down to the nitty gritty. Where do we want to start? What are you thinking, Math?
Well, Mr. Dijak, are you comfortable talking about childhood a little bit and just what got you into wrestling and when you started off?
Sure, yeah. So I started watching, um, I guess I heard about wrestling. Um, for context, I'm 38. So when I was a kid, my earliest memories are like 5 years old, 6 years old, something like that. Especially because we don't have like videos. Well, there's some home movies and stuff, but like, I think about it. I think about this a lot actually, because my kids, like every day of their life is documented like massively. Like, I can
Mhm.
show my daughter like video from yesterday, video from 2 days ago, video from, so for her, like remembering her childhood is easy because there's a constant stream of reminders going on. For me, not so much. My earliest memories are like little like glimpses, like pictures. I can remember in kindergarten, like pretending that I was a wrestler, like we all pretended we were wrestlers. But I had very little context for it outside of like WWF the arcade game. I know some of my friends had that and played that. But like in terms of like the actual product, I'd only seen like maybe like commercials or stuff like that. Like as a 6 or 7 year old kid, you don't even know like where to turn on a channel or what to do. And you look at the TV guide and it says, Saturday at whatever time. It's like, oh, I have soccer practice, whatever. You can't record it. And maybe I got to get a VCR or something, So there's this whole thing, right, as a kid that's not as easy as it is now, which is like, oh, can I just watch it? And it's like, yeah, you grab the remote and you can turn it on literally whenever you want. Um, not as simple when I was a kid. So I didn't really truly discover like full-time watching of professional wrestling until like 1998,
Mm,
which
okay.
was again, it's right in the middle of the Attitude Era, and I'm 11 at this time. So my parents weren't thrilled about that concept, and rightfully so. Like at the time, I was like, oh, they're kind of hard and they're kind of strict. But then going back and watching some of the content from the Attitude Era, I'm like, oh my God, I wouldn't, I wouldn't let my 11-year-old watch that ever. I don't have an 11-year-old, but if my son, when my son turns 11, like for sure wouldn't let him watch Attitude Era stuff. So I don't think my parents were being strict at all. I think they were being, pretty solid parents. But as most kids do, I went behind their back and, started recording it and watching it at my friend's house and things like that. Um, so that's when I started watching pretty religiously. And they sort of loosened up on that around late 99, early 2000 when I became about 13 years old. They were more okay with it. So I started watching, much more religiously, both shows every week, things like that. In
So
terms
to
of,
enter,
go ahead.
no, just to interject, who was that one character that you had to see? That one wrestler?
If you had to guess, what would you guess?
Stone Cold.
Stone Cold Steve Austin, absolutely. Yeah. So much so that when The Rock turned babyface and became like the megastar head of the whole franchise, and I refused to accept that. I was like, absolutely not. Like this guy betrayed my favorite guy. He was a dick that whole time. Sorry, I not told you I wouldn't swear.
That's
Uh,
good.
It's
he was a
okay.
he
It's
was
okay.
a
Then we
jerk.
can slide that one.
He was a jerk the entire time. Um, yeah, I refused to ever acknowledge The Rock. So, so yeah, I really didn't start to appreciate The Rock until I became a wrestler. And then I was like, oh, okay, I actually kind of like his his work. He's actually really, really entertaining. But at the time, I was like, he's pompous, he's cocky. I don't care for him at all. No matter what he did, the crowd was. I was at. I went to probably 15 or 20 shows in my childhood. Every time they came to either Manchester, New Hampshire, New Hampshire, Worcester, Massachusetts, Providence, Rhode Island, Boston, Massachusetts. Anytime they came to one of those four arenas between like early 2000 and late 2003, I probably went to every single one of those shows. So yeah, there was tons of love for The Rock. I was even at I think it was Backlash 2002 or 2003 where it was The Rock versus Goldberg. And The Rock was a bad guy at that point, I think, but everyone was still cheering for him, and I was like, nope, now I like Goldberg, you know. So so yeah, fast forward to I guess 2000. So I guess I'll try to make this a long story short. Around 2003, 2004, like I mentioned, that's sort of when high school sports took over for me, and I didn't really have time to, Monday nights were either basketball practice or a football practice or a game or whatever. Friday night, same thing. So I didn't really have time to watch pro wrestling, and DVRs weren't much of a thing. I think we had a TiVo in like 2005 or 2006 or something, but
Sounds about
Sounds
right.
about right. Yeah, it's
yeah,
about right.
it
Real
was
quick, to sidebar, and we're gonna get out of this real quick. Basketball at your height, obviously. Who was your favorite player? Just throw that in.
well, depends on like in 2004, 2005, probably like Paul Pierce. I'm a big
Oh,
Celtics fan, so
great
it's
pick.
it's
Great
usually
pick.
whoever was the best for the Celtics. My all-time favorite is Kevin Garnett. He was
Mm.
It's
just
Larry Bird. Come on. And
Larry Bird
Parrish.
retired. Larry Bird retired before I even ever saw a game. So I mean, like
Oh
going,
my God.
love watching Larry Bird highlights and stuff, but I never saw him play
Any guy
even.
who could call a shot in front of his own player and then do it. I mean, it's
Even
like
on
you guard me. I'm gonna step back, pump fake, and then I'm just gonna take a three. And he would do it to somebody. That's amazing. But anyway, go ahead, Mr. Dijak.
no, I was just gonna say, Larry Bird was tremendous, but I think he retired in 92 or 93, so I was like 6 or 7. So I don't even have a memory of watching him on TV, unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I the so long story short, I was, you know, high school sports turned to college sports. So basically from 2003 to 2010, I wasn't watching wrestling at all, just hearing about it and stuff. But once I graduated from college, I was just working a full-time job, and I said, you know what, my night's free again. So I picked up right where I left off, started watching wrestling full time again. And then through a series of coincidences, I happened to find the New England Pro Wrestling Academy, which is where I'm a trainer today in North Andover, Massachusetts. Yeah, and I started training there, and that was in 2012. So yeah, I've just been in a pro wrestling ring for the last 13 years.
Wow, that's really cool, actually. And I do want to ask, before we move on to the academy and everything. So, what all sports did you play in high school? Now I'm curious.
My three best were football, American football,
Right.
basketball, and track and field. I was a thrower, like shot put and discus. Truth
Okay,
be
that's
told,
cool.
on a national scale, I was probably best at like probably a tie between football and shot. I was pretty good at shot put, um, enough to be like top in the state, but I was also one of the top recruits for football. The 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 sad part though is my favorite was basketball. Like I wanted to be, I enjoyed playing basketball a lot more, but I was only good enough to play at like a Division 3 college level, which I did because I played at a high level for football, but then they wanted to move me to a offensive lineman position, which I didn't care for, so I transferred to a smaller school so I could play football and basketball, which I'm very happy about.
Ah,
Hey,
that's
just
fair.
remember that. Ben Wallace played for Cuyahoga Community College in Cleveland in basketball, and he
Yeah, he was
also won a championship. So you never know.
he well, I mean, I know I'm 38, so it's not happening for me. But but yeah, he was a little undersized. I
I
remember
don't, yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like he was a phenom too. Like there's
was,
only
yeah,
one Ben Wallace.
super athletic. I remember in high
Yeah,
school I would sort of compare myself to him and say, "Oh, I'm a bit of a wider body, and he's not the tallest guy in the world, but he can still play power forward at at an NBA level. So like I have a chance too." And there was in my brain, I couldn't connect the dots between like he's wildly more athletic than me. So like, because in my head I was like, I'm a pretty good athlete. I can play multiple sports and stuff, but he had like probably a 38-inch vertical or something, and just like probably 10 times stronger.
insane,
So yeah.
insane, great defender. But anyway, it's this is about you. It's not about like Ben Wallace. So like, let's go forward. So I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
When you got into school, like when you got into wrestling school and started training, like did you feel it was grueling? Did you feel it was hard? Did you expect what you had? Or were you just like were you shocked like okay, like this is wrestling school? Like what was wrestling school for you?
So for me, I started with what we call a fantasy camp, which is like everyone can sort of pay whatever, $70 or some 70 US dollars and come try a day as a professional wrestler. So the first time I stepped foot in a ring, I I did what we call I took a bump. It's a flat back bump, which is like land on your back and then hit the ropes a little bit. And just from watching it for so long, I had sort of like a muscle memory to it. Watching it and doing backyard wrestling, I would kind of portray it in my backyard, like on, mattresses or whatever, the ground sometimes, where I would just, imitate what I was seeing on television. And quite frankly, that's kind of a good way to do a lot of things I mean, people do it in basketball, they do it in football. You watch someone who's great and you try to imitate someone who's great. So I was doing the same thing with pro wrestling, and it felt very natural to me. And I said, oh, okay, I think this is what I was meant to do. This feels like something that I've been doing for a long time, even though it's my first time doing it. Um, that being said, training was very strenuous, both mentally and physically. There's really nothing like pro wrestling in terms of athleticism, and certainly in terms of cardio. An interesting story I like to tell is I did a tryout for WWE very early in my career that a lot of people don't know about. It was in June of 2013. So really, I'd been training for less than a year, and I had really just done my first match on a show. So it was very, very, very early in my career. But right from day one, I knew I wanted to wrestle for WWE. So I was sending emails to all the recruiters and stuff like that. And I ended up getting a tryout just based on my youth and my size and my look, stuff like that. I say youth, and it's funny because at the time I felt like I was kind of old because I was 25, and I would look at the FCW roster and it was like 18, 19, and I was like, uh-oh, I'm kind of old. Um, in hindsight, 25 is actually really young in pro wrestling. But yeah, I ended up getting a tryout, and they asked me, they being Canyon Seaman, who was the head of talent relations for NXT for about a decade. But at this point, he'd only been there for about a year. But he emailed me back and asked if I wanted to do the tryout for wrestlers or if I wanted to do it for athletes. And I was like, oh, I want to do it for athletes because I'm a Division 1 athlete, and I can hang with those guys. But the wrestlers, they're all going to have way more experience than me. I don't want to have to like get in the ring and wrestle guys who have 10 years experience and I'm green as hell. So I did the tryout with athletes, which was it was like 30 probably Division 1 football players and like Olympic caliber athletes, guys who had like gold medals and stuff. Um, when you do pro wrestling conditioning, and I had the great fortune of having about 9 months of pro wrestling conditioning under my belt. So I actually did really well in terms of the conditioning, like one of the top people there. People were dropping like flies. And I'm talking about like Olympic level caliber athletes, like extremely well conditioned men. I think it was all men. Yeah, this was an all male tryout. I don't know. They probably did like male and female tryouts back then or something, separately. But yeah, like people were just like after day one, like 10 guys left. It's that kind of thing. And I still hear anecdotes like this every day. I was talking to someone 2 days ago who did a tryout, and there were real legitimate athletes who just were like, this is not for me, right? Because it's just a incredibly you really, to get through the sort of mental and physical anguish and conditioning of professional wrestling, you really have to love the business of professional wrestling. Because if you think about it, like imagine doing something so physically and mentally grueling that you didn't even know what it was, and someone just told you to try it, and you see it, and you're like, this is silly. Like I don't understand. It's not even a real competition. It's more of a theater that so people don't, and that's fine. I don't hold anything against that. But like, if you put yourself in their shoes, you're like, oh, I would absolutely not. Why would I condition myself and my body to smash myself and do all these painful, tiring, exhausting things for something that I don't really care about? So really, it takes a level of like fandom to sort of be able to push yourself and continually push yourself at a level to be at where you need to be physically to succeed in the ring.
I see. And that makes a lot of sense because, I mean, to me, it is the last true theater art at this point, you know? You don't really see many others that are actually, cutting themselves open to get the real blood effect and actually look that good in the ring, as well as just doing their best to make everything look perfect and stay in that kind of condition. It is one of those things that it's not for everybody. And I don't blame anybody that's like, yeah, I just couldn't do it. It's too much. And I don't put that against anybody, but I will say I give hats off to you, man, for sticking with it
Well,
because it is a lot.
kind of interesting now that you mention it. You just sparked an idea in my head because I do a lot of acting training, or I was doing a lot
I
of
love
acting.
this.
Now I'm
I love
very
this. Keep going.
Yeah, now I'm a little busy with my independent bookings. But ironically, when I was in WWE, I had a little bit more free time. So I would spend a lot of my free time training with Howard Fine, who's one of the best acting coaches in the world. And thankfully, he does online classes. So I did a bunch of levels of his class, and he trains for both screen and theater. And whenever we talk about like theater acting, a lot of the concept is like being able to mentally commit yourself to the act that's happening without actually doing it, right? You don't want to actually like drink to get drunk or actually be like sleepy and wake up and be tired to act like you're tired, right? A lot of it is just like convincing yourself that you're in those scenarios so you can act the part and convince yourself that you feel sick without actually being sick. But now that you mention like what we do in professional wrestling and how that translates, I almost want to like do or direct a play one day that's like the opposite side of that, where you do all of the things on stage. Because like pro wrestling is one thing, right? We can actually hit each other and do all those other things. But like real life on stage would be such a wild thing to like actually have people like drinking or whatever. Maybe you don't want to do fighting unless you have trained professional wrestlers up there. But as a professional wrestler, I know some guys and we could portray that part of it. And then I don't know if you can portray falling asleep or all the different, getting sick and things like that. But like that'd be an interesting experiment if you could design a screen-written play that has elements of reality all sort of coursed throughout it. That would be a very interesting play that I think people would love to
Yeah,
watch.
Donovan, I think it would be called the plane ride from hell. Um,
I wasn't on that
no,
plane ride. I wish I was.
I know.
Wish I
You
was.
were way too young,
I would have.
but I do. You said your friend Howard Fine. Is that a real name or is that a stage name?
That's
Because
a
you know
real
who
one.
Howard Fine is.
But, I don't. Are you pronouncing the last name right? It's Fine. Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I know who he is?
Well, it was one of the names of the Three Stooges.
Oh, was it? I did not
Oh,
know
Yes,
that.
it was Fine Howard and Fine or something like that. Yeah, yeah. It was. Yes, that people
I
do not
thought,
know that. The name of the Stooges, you can look it up. Mo
yeah. Well, I mean,
Fine,
if
Curly
listen,
Fine, and Larry Howard. I think it was Larry Howard, Mo Fine, and
oh, okay.
Curly Fine. Yeah, yeah. So
That's
yeah, so
that's very
I thought you were making that, and because wrestling, you always have a stooge. I thought it was like a stage thing, so I had to call you on that. But anyway, I'm loving this interesting stuff. What match made you say I gotta turn it up and be like a star?
what match
Like
that
when
I
you're Yeah, like when you were in training and you're going through the indies and you saw a match on TV and you said, "Okay, this match has made me say I got to be a star." Like I
interest.
want that match. I want that
Yeah,
situation.
I had a bit of a light bulb moment when I was watching I had just started training and I was watching one of the early NXT. I don't know if it was Takeover or if it was just an episode of TV. And I don't think I've watched the match many times since, but I remember watching it live and it was Cesaro and Sami Zayn. And I remember thinking,
Mhm.
oh, they they've taken this to another level. And interestingly enough, I got to wrestle in that ring and in that venue at Full Sail many times after that and have great matches where I was trying to outdo them, in a lot of ways. But at that time, I remember watching that, and as someone who was just learning like lockups and shoot offs and hit the ropes, and this is how you pin, and I'm watching them do all that stuff combined with the psychology of it and the impact and the violence and the storytelling and all that stuff, and I'm like, wow, this is a completely different level, and I need to push myself harder than I've ever pushed before if I ever want to get to that level. So it was cool in the moment because this is 2013 or 2014 maybe at the time, and to kind of escalate and elevate myself to the point where I started to have matches that were sort of in that realm conceptually maybe a year or a year and a half later, because that's when I really started, to hit the ground running with Ring of Honor and stuff. So I really had to sort of step my game up in that capacity. And then obviously as I elevated through NXT, we started to, push harder and harder and push that envelope in terms of, trying to, break ground and sort of reinvent the wheel.
See
That's
it.
really
See.
awesome, man. Mav, I'm gonna let you take the next couple questions because I've got a couple questions that I've had some fans that want me to ask him. So I want you to actually take the lead a little bit here for a little bit.
Okay, no problem, man. So I do want to ask about, so given where you are now, what
Yep.
advice would you give to your younger self starting out training and just your first couple of years in?
Um, what advice would I give myself earlier? I'd probably say like don't be in such a rush. I felt like I was in this huge rush, which because I mentioned earlier, I thought I started when I was 25 and I felt like I was like really behind the eight ball because in my mind, pro wrestlers like you had to start training at 15 and living out of your car at 16 and then you were ready to hit the road at 17 and you were a world champion by 18. Like that was my mindset of how professional wrestling worked. And I would look at the developmental roster, and there was a lot of young guys on there, and I'd say, "Oh, I'm way behind the eight ball. I need to at least be in WWE by the time I'm, you know, 29 or 30, something like that." So when that opportunity came, I jumped all over it. In hindsight, I feel like I could have used a little bit more so I don't want to dissuade myself from having that push and having that drive and continuing to push and feel like my back is against the wall because I still have that to this day, and it's still what drives me and motivates me. I just want to make sure that my decisions that I made weren't so hasty because I jumped at Ring of Honor and then I jumped at WWE and it feels like sometimes I didn't survey the whole situation and say, maybe 6 months from now might be a little bit better of a scenario, or have the conversations that I could have had in those scenarios instead of just saying like, oh, here's the contract, sign on the dotted line as quick as possible, right? I could have had a conversation before that and been like, what's the plan? What are the thought process here? But in my mind, it was like, oh, they're offering you a contract. Don't ask what the plan is. That's disrespectful, right? They're gonna have a plan for you. So in if I could give advice to my younger self, it'd be don't be afraid to, ask those questions. Don't be afraid to broach those topics and things like that. It's a two-way street. Like you're signing a contract, but like there's a reason, right? There's agreements on both ends of a contract, and you should feel comfortable having those conversations and things like that. So that would be my advice.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you got to read the fine print and realize like, okay, I'm signing here. Here's what they're asking of me, and where do I feel that I need to fit in as well. And there's a
Yeah.
lot to it when you're signing into anything, I feel like, I mean, I've signed many contracts so far in my life, and it's always like you never know what exactly could happen, especially if you just don't read it. You have to really read in the fine print. I don't mean to get too much in my personal life here, but every time that I sign off a job or anything saying an aircraft is good to go as I'm a mechanic on them, it is a contract saying this is perfectly flyable. There's no issues with it. If I just pencil whipped in, just didn't care, then yeah, everything could fall apart if I'm not paying enough attention. So that's understandable that you would look back at your old self and just say, well, maybe I should have read the room a little bit more, figured out everything that could have been in my plans. But I do also want to ask you about so you weren't pushed correctly, I don't feel like, when you were in your WWE time. I kind of felt
True.
like you had a lot more potential and you could have done a lot more, but it feels like I want to use almost Braun Strowman in a way as an example because like you have this guy with a lot of talent, but what are you going to do with him? And then they just kind of don't know. Maybe it's the image. How did you feel about the situation?
So, I mean, pro wrestling is a lot about sort of timing. There's elements of timing, there's elements of luck, there's elements of talent and ability, and there's also a lot of like business factors and money making factors and boxes that are checked and things like that. So I refer to it as a pie chart almost. And it's this big pie chart where a lot of it is stuff you don't control, and a smaller piece of it is stuff that you do control. You want to fill out as much of that as possible, and then just kind of like hope that the rest of it like rounds out as much as possible. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't, and that's just part of it. I mean, I was in WWE for 7 years, so I knew a lot of people, and I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people, and I was around a lot of people, from the people all the way at the top of the card to the people who, were only there for a cup of coffee and barely, had anything. Um, it's a double-edged sword for everybody. Nobody's like 1000% happy with 100% of the scenarios that happen. I got to go do this media appearance, or I got to do this, or I got to do that. And meanwhile, someone else on the other end of the spectrum is like, "Oh, I would love to do a media appearance." That's actually a conversation I had a lot of times as I was asking to be on house shows. And I was like, "Please, can I be on these house shows?" Because I know that there's 100 guys who don't want to be on house shows.
Yeah.
I'm like, "I'll take that
Pay
spot
sheets.
happily,
Pay
please. I
sheets,
love
right?
wrestling." Yeah, but just the business model and the way that it is the house shows aren't there to like get reps and stuff or to have good matches. They're there to here's the stars, here's the people you see on TV, and come see them and buy a bunch of tickets and stuff like that. So I get it. I get a lot of it from a business aspect. Um, the reality of the situation is I wanted to be a top guy, and I asked many times what I needed to be and needed to do to be a top guy. Um, I don't think that on the one hand, I don't hold it against anyone because there was a lot of like, oh well, just keep doing this and keep doing it. And so in a sense, that's not wrong, right? No one would ever come to me and say like, oh, just cross your finger, work real hard and hope. Because that would obviously be sort of detrimental advice to a talent. Um, but so I understand like why they didn't say that. But you know, again, it's a lot of it's timing. That being said, I had a great. I was given a lot of things that ended up being very fortunate for me in the realm of professional wrestling, right? So like especially my runs in NXT, right? I was on multiple premium live events. I was in relevant storylines. I was able to have marquee matches on big stages. Um, as recently as a year ago, I had the biggest match of my entire career, which was to stand and deliver for the North American Championship in front of 16,000 people, right? So I can't look back at it and be like, "Woe is me! I'm so," it's that was a wonderful mainstream sort of opportunity that's still paying dividends to this day. Did I want more? Did I want to be a representative champion for the company? Absolutely. And I tried everything in my power to get that. But again, a lot of it's, stuff that's out of your control and timing and things like that. So what I did get, I'm very thankful for because it gives me the opportunity to come out on shows like I did last night, for example, Beyond Wrestling in Worcester, Massachusetts, which is, my home where I'm billed from. And as soon as my music hits and I come out, people recognize me. They've seen me on TV. They've seen me on these premium live events. They come to my merch stand. They buy a lot of my merchandise and stuff like that. So I'm able to make a living off of professional wrestling. So for that, I'm extremely grateful because there's so many people who, even people who have time in WWE who aren't able to make a living off of this once they're done with pro wrestling, and that would be a very unfortunate situation, right? If I were unable to do that. I'm extremely lucky in that sense. So I'm very thankful for my time and the opportunities that I got with WWE.
I see. So, you seem like a very positive person and a big go-getter with every opportunity you could possibly go after. And there is somebody that I do want to reference with this. I think it was Matt Cardona who had talked about after being released and everything, or it feels like every time that WWE goes through a list of new people who have been released, hey, you have a couple of options here. You can either let yourself fade into obscurity and say, woe is me, or you can get up and you can do your best outside of that company and build yourself. And I feel like you've done that very well. I mean, a few months ago, I was watching a little bit of MLW here and there. And I remember watching your match with Kenta, and I thought, man, this
Yes.
is probably
Great
the
match.
best on the card. I really liked it. And I thought, man, I think this guy has a lot more than what he was given, but either way, he's still building on himself. And that's something that I think you are very good at right now is you are keeping yourself relevant, even if you may not be in the top company, but you don't have to make yourself relevant anymore. The internet and all these indie shows, they're willing to hire you, and I know that for a fact. And I'm very glad that you're able to keep yourself going. But I do want to ask you, do you have anything in the future that you'd like to promote real quick?
Uh, I mean, yeah, like you mentioned MLW, that's going extremely well for me. I'm very happy with the like I said earlier, the advice I gave I wanted to give my younger self. Well, that's the advice I'm giving myself right now, right? So I've had those conversations with Court, with Jared at MLW about, here's where I am in my career, here's what I want out of this partnership, and they've fulfilled their end of the bargain, like very much so. We're less than a year in, and I've already been. Just 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was in Mexico for CMLL wrestling at Arena Mexico. I've
Great.
wrestled MLW World Championship twice now. The storylines are there; they're consistent. They listen to my creative ideas. So the my whole goal has been to rebrand myself, right? I have an image, I have a brand, I have how people picture me, and it's good, right? It's a very positive thing for people to look at you and say, "Oh, that's one of the best wrestlers in the world. Every time he wrestles, he has a great match," right?
Hmm.
So that's a positive thing, but I need to continue to adjust that, right? Because I'm past the point where I need people to look at me and say that guy's always going to have a great match, right? Now I need people to look at me and say, oh, that's the guy that wins. That's the champion, right? That's my guy, right? He represents me, right? Because having a great match is awesome. It's having a great match, but let's call a spade a spade. I never won a championship in WWE, so I was the guy who always had great matches, but usually lost them, right? So now I'm working on rebranding that image and making people so that I can be viewed as a top guy because that's my goal, right? I want to be the face of a company, and MLW is giving me that opportunity. So I'm extremely thankful for them. We have a show coming up in New York City on June 26th. I'm gonna double check that date just to make sure that it's right. I'm pretty sure it's a Thursday. June 26th, yes, in New York City. So that will be my next appearance for MLW. I'm very much looking forward to it. I mean, that's my number one company. So I'm very excited to be with them consistently. Um, it's been a wonderful partnership and opportunity so far, and like you mentioned, I'm just continually trying to rebrand and rebuild myself less rebuild, more rebrand, and give people and myself the opportunity to see what it looks like to have me as the face of a company.
Absolutely.
Well, do you mind if I ask a couple of fan questions?
Sure, go ahead.
All right. So, first of all, Josh Turner wants to know what was it like when they approached you to do Retribution and just change yourself and become this other character? And how did you feel about it, knowing it was pandemic and you knew basically this was just a weird thing?
It was
You're smiling so
no,
big. You're
it was
smiling
funny.
bigger than me.
It was funny because the second you said, "Can I ask you a fan question?" I said, "Sure, go ahead." And in my mind, I said, "It's going to be about retribution. It's going to be about what Vince said to me. It's going to be because that's all fans want to know because it's such a fascinating thing." So he asked how I was approached about it. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
yeah.
I wasn't approached by it. I approached Vince with the idea because he came up with retribution. The timeline is very weird, and again, I don't blame anyone for not having this correct because it was the pandemic, right? So we were all like, freaking. It's funny when you think back to it. There's almost like a pre-pandemic life and then a post-pandemic life, and then everything in that 2 years is like a complete blur. Like our heads were spinning and stuff. So I
Mhm.
totally understand how everyone's like perception of time is way off. Um, just as a general refresher for those who were only casually paying attention at the time, which is a lot of. Um,
Yeah.
we had just we were still we Monday Night Raw was still in the performance center at the time. There were fans there, but they were behind like a big glass thing. And Vince had introduced on Twitter for some reason, like tonight on Monday Night Raw, a rogue group of bandits are going to be doing something. They're calling themselves Retribution or something like that. And then that night, they showed some CCTV footage of like a bunch of people in ninja outfits, like throwing a Molotov cocktail at something that didn't really look like a generator. Basically, what I had come to find out was they were throwing all this stuff together like hours in advance. Like
How
Vince,
could you still broadcast if you took out the generator? Go ahead.
there's lots of questions like that. But again, I wasn't involved in any of this. I was just watching it from not even from afar, because like I was one of the people in the crowd. Like I was like a fan, like just cheering and booing and stuff. So I'm watching this stuff, and in my mind, uh, I don't want to make this a big long story about me and my call-ups and things like that. But let's just say at this point I was quote unquote on the roster of Raw. Things were extremely volatile at that point. So like the contract was different and who knew who was where and all this different stuff. But like theoretically speaking, I was done with NXT at this point. Karrion Kross had like hit his submission on me and choked me out to build to him and Keith Lee for the NXT championship. So I was effectively done as far as I knew with NXT, and I was now a member on Monday Night Raw. That being said, Monday Night Raw had no creative plan for me as far as I knew. Um, so I'm just kind of like in purgatory basically, and I see this thing with Retribution, and I see what it is, and I have all the same questions that you and lots of fans have. And I'm saying, oh, they need wrestlers to populate this, right? Because again, I'm in the company, so I know that the people who are doing it are not wrestlers. They had like extras who are wrestlers, but they're like, indie wrestlers or whatever, and or local talent, we'll call them. And and some of them were writers, right? So they needed like 10 people or whatever to like, chainsaw the ropes or whatever and all that stuff and like throw cinder blocks through a glass window. Um, but none of them are like roster talent. They're all either local talent or writers.
Extras, yeah.
Extras, yeah. So I'm watching this and I'm saying, oh, they need obviously this is going to be a focal point of the show. Because it's being introduced in like relevant segments. Like I don't know if you remember this, but like Randy Orton like did his punt kick on Ric Flair. Like that's a massive moment in WWE history. And the lights flickered and went out because of Retribution, so that at the end of the day, it was a solution to a problem, which was they didn't want to punt Ric Flair for real. But it's still part of the storylines and stuff like that. So I'm saying, okay, this is going to be a part of this brand going forward of WWE. So I want to be a part of it. And I know people who can be a part of this. So long story short, I went directly to Vince. I introduced myself. I pitched myself and a bunch of other people to populate Retribution. And I showed him my idea, my presentation. Ultimately, all told, he took about half of what I said and used it between the names that I had and the presentation that I had, and then the other half of it he put his spin on it. So that's kind of
Son of a fish. So you were the brains behind Retribution.
about half of it, yeah, yeah, about half of it. What I would refer to as the good half. So here I'll tell you exactly what I pitched. I pitched myself, Dio Madden, who ended up being Mace and is now Mason Madden in MXM in AEW. I pitched Shane Thorne, who's now Shane Haste in New Japan.
Well, the Mighty Don't Kneel. I love those guys. I've followed them. Like I'm a wrestling historian, so I've loved those guys. Go ahead, sir.
I think I also pitched Killian Dane, who's now Big Damo. I
Hmm.
pitched Tommaso Ciampa, and I pitched, I think, Nikki Cross and maybe one other, but that might be it. So I think it was those six. So it ended up being me, Shane, Dio, or Mason, and uh, Mia Yim, who I think was still like actively on NXT at the time. So that's probably why I
Yeah,
didn't know her. And then Ali ended up being our leader. I think
Mustafa.
Yeah, so I didn't pitch him obviously because he was like on SmackDown or so that ended up coming into play later. So again, about half of the stuff that I had there, and then in terms of the presentation, I did want masks, so I did pitch masks, but I wanted them as entrance masks that we would take off. And in terms of the names that I pitched, the names in the backstory, I wanted it as one name, all caps. So I guess theoretically he liked that, but I pitched Dijak, Dio, Thorn, and then whatever for the other ones. I don't remember what I pitched, but obviously what we ended up getting was T-Bar, Mace, and Slapjack.
Yeah,
One word, all
but
caps. So like it had a lot of the elements that I'd pitched, but it was like, ooh, we changed just enough to make that really weird.
so I don't know if anybody knows this. This is a great admission. This is a great wrestling admission that nobody knows about. I don't know if you've talked about this in other podcasts before, and if you have, great. But for us, this is a very big thing because everybody's asked about that. And in like the early 2000s or not early 2000s, but like 2020, 2021, on the podcast here at wwepodcast.com, Matt, the host, and I would do some shows together, and he would be like, "What do you think about Retribution?" I was like, "That that boat has sailed into the sunset. It's gone." And I felt bad because you guys were doing the best you could, giving what you were given. You were given a bowl of rice, and you were asked for stir fry. It's
Yeah,
like, okay, well, I can make rice, but I can only flavor it with so many things. So I think it's amazing that you were one of the pioneers of this situation and what you wanted it to be. And as far as, your cohorts and everybody who was there, I wished way better for it. And I being a follower of you since probably 2012, 2013 or whatever. When I first started seeing you on Ring of Honor, probably 2013 or 14, I just wanted bigger things for you. So, um, can I lead you into my next question?
sure.
Sure. All right. So, do you feel that there's a stigmatism because you're what, 6'7", 6'8"?
6'7", yeah.
Yeah. That you have to wrestle different. This is from Chris Pasanti, by the way. You have to wrestle different versus a small man who's a star versus a small man who's not a star.
Yes. Yeah, they're well, not just a small man, but every man. You need to take star power and booking into account, right? It doesn't matter what their size is, right? If I'm everything plays a role in terms of my psychology in how I wrestle, how I talk to someone, how I encounter someone. It all plays a role because that's how, life works, right? If I'm if I'm walking down the street and I encounter a guy who's 6'1", 220, and he's running his mouth at me, like that's not a major threat. But if I walk into a UFC cage and I'm wrestling and I'm fighting Matt Riddle, who's 6'1", 220, that's a whole different, and he's running his mouth at me. That's a whole different ball game. I need to approach that differently. I'm speaking to him differently. I'm fighting him differently. That's life, right? Size plays a
Yeah,
role, right? It plays a role, but it's not the be all end all, right? So I approach it. Yeah, I understand what he's getting at, right? He's saying like sometimes there's a huge size difference and it ends up being a squash match, but sometimes you're wrestling like a Finn Balor and it's not a squash match, right? He's beating me and he's beating me clean or whatever. And I've done both of those many times. Around the same time, I was wrestling squash matches on main event a lot of the time, and it'd be a smaller guy, and then I'd go and I'd have to wrestle Finn Balor at Madison Square Garden. That's obviously not a squash match. It honestly would trend more in the direction of him getting over on me pretty handily. Like I would hit a false finish or two on him, but he was the star and I wasn't. I was T-bar, right? So even though there's a massive size difference, so yeah, we take it into account, but I'm not all over the ring and making him look like a goof, right? This is a former Universal Champion, so and he's one of the most over guys in the company. So I'm not just tossing him around like a rag doll. Like you have to give him some, some purpose, some gravitas, and quite frankly, he's you know uh, got more experience than me, and he's more of a veteran than me, so he would probably call most of the match, and he's not going to call a bunch of nonsense where I'm just chucking him out of the ring and stuff like that. He's going to
yeah,
be beating me up pretty well. So yeah, there's obviously it plays a factor in terms of how you structure things and what your psychology is for sure.
like it. All right, so my last question is from Eli Brow, and Eli would like to know basically when you go into a match, if you have basically, I don't know how to say this, diarrhea or something like that, how do you deal with it?
Um,
I
actually,
hate, but it's a
no, it's
question
fair.
for you,
It's a fair.
so
It's a fair question. Someone actually asked me something similar recently. Um, I've been fortunate. I've never been that sick when I have to wrestle. Interestingly, this has come up sort of recently because I was wrestling, like I mentioned, in Mexico, and that did get to a bunch of us.
of
The
course,
guys
it's
I was with
Mexico.
more so than me. Mine wasn't so bad. Um, I mean, we're all human beings, so we know that like you usually you go and then you get like a certain amount of time as a reprieve, right? You're not just like going unless you're massively ill, right? The
But
only time
that's not like it's norovirus or something like that,
yeah, the
right?
only
So,
time the only time in my pro wrestling career where I've ever been that sick, where I felt like I had to live in the bathroom,
oh, poor.
but I had to go do something on television was actually interestingly, it was actually the first NXT TV taping we ever did at the Performance Center, which, if you remember the timeline, was the last NXT TV taping we ever did with a crowd because the pandemic hit that night. And then the next day, SmackDown or whatever, or 2 days later, SmackDown was at the Performance Center in that exact same setup, in that exact same building. In hindsight, it makes me wonder if they did that show at the Performance Center because they knew that the COVID shutdown was coming. But yeah, we did NXT TV, and at that time it was on Wednesday nights, I think. So yeah, that night, thank goodness, all I had was a run-in. If you go watch it back, I think Keith wrestled Trevor Lee, maybe, or something like, whose name was Cameron Grimes. And then
He's great.
Damian
He's great.
Priest did something and like knocked him out or something. And I came in to make the save and to run Priest off. And then I picked Keith up and Keith gave me his power bomb finish because he was distracted or thought it was me or something. So thankfully, all I had was that little 30-second segment or whatever. But like I went from the bathroom, washed my hands to the ring, directly back to the bath because I was so sick. And in my mind, I was like, oh,
Oh, God,
my mind, I was like,
Lord.
oh, I have COVID. Because if you remember, nobody knew what COVID was and nobody knew what the symptoms were. So for me, I was like, oh, I have this such bad like stomach virus. This must be what COVID was. And in hindsight, it was obviously not COVID. Um, but the shutdown came like literally that night or like the next day or something like that. And but yeah, I've not so to answer the question, I've never been so sick where it is the problem isn't solved by going to the bathroom, a few minutes before I have to go out for the match. And almost, not almost, every show that I've ever done in my life, there's a bathroom accessible somewhere in the locker room or near the locker room. So yeah, I get my gear on, I call the match, I go to the bathroom, and then I wash my hands and I go wrestle, and then your body takes over from that point and you don't have to worry about it. But I've heard, horror stories of some guys who have to like, you know, use a
I heard a story about like Sid Vicious, which a guy I prank called one time, and if you listen to old shows, it's really funny. One of our
yeah.
old shows, but yeah, Sid Vicious powerbomb JYD, and in the middle of the ring, he just shies. So
I've heard some guys who use what's called a muffler before. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. Uh,
no, go ahead,
it's like I'll leave it to your imagination. You do something interesting.
wrestle muffler.
You
Come
do
on,
something
yeah,
you
what do
do
you think?
something you do something interesting with like a roll of toilet paper. So we'll just leave it at that rather than going into the gruesome
Dear,
details.
dear Lord, dear Lord.
Yeah, I've never done
Well,
that.
This conversation took an interesting turn.
Well, here we
yes,
are.
yeah, we definitely
If
did.
if anything if anything's gonna go viral, it's gonna be this. I want to name the person who told me that they do that. I'm not going to do it. They're very popular right now and very mainstream, so it would go viral, and I'm not going to out him like that. So take that for what it's worth. Maybe he's said it on other
So,
podcasts. People can connect the dots, but
so
I'm not.
sometime down in the future, can we do a show called Wrestle Muffler? Just talking about talking
Sure,
about ribs and
sure.
like that. I mean that's another one. Like, I don't know how we're doing on the timeline. How are we doing, Mav?
We got about 8 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, tell me a good rib you've pulled or a rib that you've done on somebody else.
Everybody asks me this. I don't have one. Ribbing is not much of a thing as it used to be. It really isn't. I know people love the stories from like the 80s and the 90s where these guys were like doing these horrible, heinous things to each other. I've never seen it. I've never encountered it. The worst ribs that I see nowadays are like people will like hide someone's boots or whatever, and that was like 10 years ago. I really don't see it anymore. It's no longer the culture. It really isn't. I, I saw a video the other day of like Zelina Vega like prank calling Dominic Mysterio as a child. That's probably like the worst thing you're gonna. That's probably like the worst rib you're gonna get nowadays. Unfortunately, if you guys have heard something more recent, then by all means, I'd love to hear it. But I don't hear any of these anecdotes. Maybe people just don't mess with me specifically because I don't mess with them. I don't know. Maybe, but yeah, I have none, unfortunately.
That's fair. Times have changed, it is what it is.
Yeah, it's just the locker. It's just a completely different thing, right? I was even sort of part of the transition because there was a little bit of that like sort of old school, old guard mentality when I started in 2012, where it was like, don't speak unless spoken to, and everyone in the locker room was these huge, huge guys. Um, there was a lot of them were on pills or in the corner drinking. And then there was this whole thing where they're trying to find the female fans from that night who are, are gonna continue the night and things like that. So that was like part of it, but then there was this trend in a different direction. And it's really sort of parted ways from that over time, where now I go to the locker room and there's no like there used to be fights in the locker room, there used to be brawls, people all the time. There's just everyone was on edge about everything and everyone was now there's a really sort of I don't encounter that much anymore. Especially, and this isn't like me like uh putting myself over as some sage wizard or whatever, but the reality is most locker rooms I go into nowadays, like I'm the veteran for the most part. I'm both the person with the most experience and the person with the most years in the business and the person with the highest level of uh uh I've been on TV the longest in terms of most of the locker rooms I'm in now. Outside of MLW. MLW has a lot of veterans and stuff like that, but most like indie locker rooms, like last night, for example. So yeah, I, maybe it's a trend just because I'm a boring Nancy who just kind of like shows up and laughs and is gets along with everyone, and we call our match, and the goal is to have the best match of the night and things like that, rather than like where are we going after, like who has the somas and things like that. That maybe that was the trend 15, 20 years ago or whatever, but now it's just not.
Yeah, different world. It makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah.
I love
Well,
this interview. I love the fact that you're very candid and you're just like going straight forward and talking about like, the difference between, locker rooms for years to years. That's really awesome that you're like opening up about that.
Yeah, it used to smell like baby oil and hot stuff too, which I kind of miss. I kind of have like a nostalgia for that, which is funny because I used baby oil. I never used hot stuff. Um, but now when I'm in a locker room and I smell baby oil and hot stuff, I'm like, oh, it piques my like nostalgia for when I was younger and just starting off in the business. But at the same time, I'm like, who's wearing baby oil and who's wearing hot stuff? Because get it off. The baby oil makes the ropes all slippery. The hot stuff burns my eyes. I'm just screaming about it the whole match because it's such a nightmare to have to worry about that. Like I'm a 275-pound guy doing moonsaults off the top rope, and if somebody hits the
Tiger
bell
Balm.
and there's baby oil all over it, think about how much that could like potentially harm me as a human being. Like if I slip and pencil into the ground, like that's a ton of weight coming down on my neck and my vertebrae just because somebody wanted to be like glistening or whatever. Like there's tons of other options. I put on a top sheer coat of shininess when I'm wrestling on TV, and it's not slippery. It's almost like oily in a way, but it like has some grip to it. But it's from if any pro
Just
wrestler needs.
grab, just use tea tree oil. And it's good for your body.
Well, the thing I use is from a company that does the tanning. They do it for like competitions.
Oh,
Um,
you can plug it here. If you want to plug it, go ahead, plug it.
I don't make any money off of it. It's,
fair.
Well,
if
we
you
do
Google
need
hard
you
enough, you're
to
gonna
make
find it.
yeah. If we do need you to make money though, so you will plug at the end.
All right, so we're getting close to the end here, guys. So, as we always ask at the end of WrestleMagic, Mr. Dijak, could we get some recommendations for that from you for the audience? Just anything that you like, movie, TV show, video game, poem, cat breed,
Sure,
dog breed, doesn't matter what it is.
sure, yeah. My favorite movie of all time is Seven by David Fincher. I love that movie. I go back and watch it all the time. I think it's great. The show that I'm currently watching on TV is why can't I remember the name of it? Tom Hardy's in it. I don't know if anyone else is watching this. It's UK based. It's London based. Somebody will figure it out. Somebody post it. Can't remember the name of it. But yeah, that's it.
All right, fair enough, no problem there. And so if anybody wants to try to reach you or reach out to you or book you or anything, how can they do that?
All my social media stuff is at Dijak, FYE. Booking me is bookdijak@gmail.com. My school, you can check out my school, the Dijak Wrestling Academy. It's dijakwrestling.com. It's an online school just like this. I actually have it in 1 minute. My class starts in 1 minute, so everybody's probably waiting for me right now to get to hop onto that. But I'm going to teach a 2-hour course. It's once a week, every week. Check it out, dijakwrestling.com. But you missed the first week already, and by the time this comes out, you'll have missed the second week. So maybe wait for the next round, which will be in probably 3 or 4 months.
Fair
All
enough.
right, Mr. Dijak, my name is Michael Gross. I am at 144 Captain on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I think that you're incredible, and I want you to do this. I want you to go into your school today and just look at one recruit, stone cold faced, stoic as possible, and just scream, "Lather up, cupcake," and then just walk away.
Well, it's a
Will
Zoom
you
class.
do?
It'll be on Zoom, and I can promise you that I will absolutely not do that. That sounds like a loss waiting to
Son of a
happen.
fish! Come on, man.
Nah, dude, that sounds like a possible
Lather up,
harassment charge there.
cupcake.
Yeah,
That will you do that? Will you do it for like when you do an actual in person? Will you just scream at somebody and say "Lather up, cupcake" and just walk away and just let them try?
Not. No, I'm not doing that. No, you do it.
This. Well, I don't have a wrestling school and I'm 50 years old. Come on, man.
Oh,
I can't do this.
always time. All right, I gotta go. I gotta get to my
All
class.
right, guys. You have a great one.
Thank you.
Thank
too.
you.
All right.
All right, bye.
All right, guys. So
Well,
that concludes the interview that we had with Mr. Donovan Dijak. You guys know how I end the episode every single time. Do something nice for somebody. You never know who needs it out there. Somebody's always going to. And, with that, Michael, do you have a movie recommendation for this week?
I think I sure do. I'm gonna go with Old Boy, and that's just really wrong, but I'm talking about the Korean version, and it's gonna mess you up. But hey, it's Old Boy.
Fair enough. All right. Well, for anybody out there listening, I will recommend a match this time. And that match is just going to be from MLW. I believe it was Kings of Colosseum. And that match with Kenta, it was very good. And yeah, it was one of those that actually kept me at least a little bit interested in the show. The rest of it, I wasn't hugely thrilled on or hugely high on it. But that one match, I thought, this is good. And seeing what I did want to bring up, but we didn't quite have the time for, was the fact that Dijak and Kenta have similar finishing moves, but it feels like it's more inverted from his end. But either way, with that, in the words of my friend
That was a
Memphis
great
Mark,
match.
we're out.
Thanks for listening to the WWE Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a show, or head to WWEpodcast.com. And for all of these shows ad-free, head over to patreon.com/WWE Podcast. Until then, we'll see you next time.